Hi, I'm Rickie Jenkins. I'm one of the preachers for the Campbell Road Church of Christ. Every Sunday, Lord's Day, we come together and we open God's Word and we study God's Word. We'd like to have you come visit with us and open His Word and study with us.
This morning, as I want to continue my third of the lessons I'm doing on Christians and alcohol, I want to address what I talk about are some challenging passages. Now, I'm not going to be able to address every passage you have a thought about. If I don't address one you have a thought about, I'd be glad to talk to you about it. I've got approximately 35 to 40 minutes. This is Mother's Day, and you went out so you can eat lunch with your mothers, and so we're going to let you do that. But I'm going to discuss what I think are some of the more prominent ones that we often talk about when we think about the idea of Christians and alcohol and what takes place in the life of Jesus and His disciples. The first one I'd like to think about is Luke chapter 7, beginning in verse 33. For John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you say he has a demon. The Son of Man has come eating and drinking, and you say, look, a glutton and a winebibber, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is justified by all her children. If we back up about verse 22, you see the disciples of John had come ask Jesus, are you the one, or do we look for another? And Jesus gives them empirical evidence to point to who He is as the Messiah. And so in verse 24 it says, when the messengers of John departed, he began to speak to the multitudes concerning John. What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken by the wind? What did you go out to see? A man clothed in soft garments? Indeed, those who are gorgeously apparelled and live in luxury are in the king's courts. What did you go out to see? Prophet, yes, I say to you, more than a prophet. This is he of whom it is written, behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you. For I say to you, among those born of women, there is not one greater than John the Baptist. But he who is least in the kingdom of God is greater than he. And all the people heard him, even the tax collectors, justified God, having been baptized with the baptism of John. But the Pharisees and lawyers rejected the will of God for themselves, not having been baptized by him. And the Lord said to them, what then shall I liken men of this generation and what they're like? They're like children sitting in the marketplace, calling to one another. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We mourned to you, and you did not weep. John the Baptist came neither eating nor drinking, and you say as a demon. The Son of Man comes eating and drinking, and you say, look, a glutton, a winebibber, and a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Wisdom is justified by all her children. First of all, Jesus is saying, you're not happy with whoever comes. We played to you flute music. We played to you very happy music, and you weren't happy about that. We sang the Wayfaring Stranger for you. That song that's just so dull and mournful. And we had good funeral music for you, and you were happy about that. And I sent John. All you can do is say he's a demon. I come to you, and all you can do is say, I'm a glutton, a winebibber, friend of sinners. What's it going to take to make you happy? I think that's the overview of the passage. Let's deal specifically with 1 John chapter 7, verses 33 and 34. For John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you say he has a demon. First of all, there is a figure of speech that is used here. When Jesus says, John came neither eating nor drinking, he's saying John didn't come and share a common meal with you. That's what he's saying. That's the figure of speech. It's a synecdoche. I know it's a big word. It's a part put for the whole. What are the parts when you sit down to eat? You have bread and you have a drink. But is that all you have? No, you have other things that go with it. So John, he came, he didn't sit down at the table with you, need a common meal with you. And all you do is say he has a demon. But wait a minute. It says he came neither eating bread nor drinking wine. So is Jesus asserting here that John drank wine? Well, turn back to Luke chapter 1 and verse 15. Speaking of John, he'll be great in the sight of the Lord, and shall drink neither wine nor strong drink. He'll be filled with the Holy Spirit, even from his mother's womb. Look at Matthew chapter 11. Matthew chapter 11 and verse 18. Same scenario painted in Luke chapter 7. Except Matthew says, John came neither eating or drinking. And they say he has a demon. Well, Matthew says he came eating and drinking. Luke chapter 1 says John can't drink wine or strong drink, and yet Luke chapter 7 verse 33 says he came neither eating bread nor drinking wine. So do we have a contradiction? Did John drink wine where in Luke chapter 1 it says he can't? Or is this indeed a figure of speech for the fact that John lived a very ascetic life? The point here is not the what happened. The point here is about the amount that happened. Because another figure of speech is used in verse 34. The Son of Man has come eating and drinking, and you say, here is a hyperbole that they're using. Jesus says he didn't come sharing a common meal and drinking to the point that he was intoxicated if he drank wine. Not necessarily here denying he drank wine. He's using a figure of speech. But here I come, and all you can do, this is what you can say. It's a hyperbole. They're using a hyperbole to try to condemn Jesus. The hyperbole doesn't mean he actually did it. Someone says, well, how would you call him a glutton if he didn't eat? Well, it doesn't say he didn't eat. It's saying he didn't eat without restraint. That's what a glutton is. Jesus ate, but what did he do? He ate with restraint. A wine bibber. Well, if he hadn't drank something that he could be drunk, then he wouldn't be called a wine bibber. Where does a hyperbole ever represent the truth? Does that mean Jesus didn't drink wine? No. But he drank it with restraint. Does it mean it was intoxicating? No. And then it says he was a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Was Jesus a friend of tax collectors and sinners? He says he was. Did he go into the house of tax collectors and sinners? Yes. Does that mean he sat down and endorsed and engaged in everything tax collectors and sinners engaged in? No. Well, if he can eat without being a glutton, and if he can go into the house of tax collectors and sinners without engaging in everything tax collectors and sinners do and justifying them by joining in that with them, can he not also drink without being called a wine bibber? And so what you have here is you have a hyperbole where they're trying to condemn Jesus because he's not like John, but John wasn't like Jesus. And so it's not the what that happened, it's the amount that's under consideration. Jesus did not drink the amount that we call a wine bibber, and he doesn't have to drink intoxicating stuff to be accused of doing so. We talked last week quite extensively about terms. And as I quoted the man from the store that I went to, and he said, the way that people use wine in that day is different than the way we talk about wine today. Well, here you have an illustration of that. So is Jesus engaged in intoxicating drink to the point he became drunk? No. Did he have a common meal with people? Yes. Did he sit down and drink at a common meal with people? Yes. Did he drink wine? Yes. Did he engage with tax collectors and sinners? Yes. Did he become like them? Did he participate with them? No. I don't know how Luke chapter 7, verses 33 through 34 can be used as justification For someone to say, well, Jesus is accused of being a wine bibber, so I can drink. I can involve in the use of alcohol. I can be involved in social drinking. I can go pull my bottle of wine off the shelf. I can go pull my bottle of spirits off the shelf because Jesus did it. Well, first of all, you have to find that's what Jesus did. And that's not what it's saying. Turn to John chapter 2. I'm sorry, I missed a slide there. Dodo. That's a good question. You got it? Now moving on. Sometimes I get up here and I'm so concentrated on what I'm going to do and say and start that I lose my mind about everything else. But turn to John chapter 2. If Luke chapter 7 is used, John chapter 2 is really used. In fact, of all the ones I'm going to mention, I think John chapter 2 is the one that's used the most. So it begins in verse 7. Jesus filled the water pots with water. They filled them to the brim. And he said to them, draw out some now and take it to the master of the feast. And they took it. For the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine and did not know where it came from, but the servants but the servants who had drawn the water knew. The master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, every man at the beginning sets out the good wine, and when the guests have well drunk, then the inferior. You have kept the good wine until now. This beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. And this he went down to Capernaum, he and his mother and his brothers and his disciples, and they did not stay there many days. I'm going to use a hyperbole. So is this saying that before Jesus had turned the water to wine, whatever wine was supplied, it enabled the people to get wasted, and Jesus comes and supplies more of the same thing, just better, and allows them to get wasted even more? Now that's a hyperbole. Does that mean that happened? No. Is it saying here that, well, when the guests have well drunk, then the inferior? Is it saying there the guests are drunk? Well, the word drunk can mean many things. It can mean intoxicated. It can also mean well-filled. They've reached the limit. Here's what we would say. We sit down at a table and eat, and we get up and say, I'm stuffed. I'm filled to the full. And sometimes the word drunk is used not as intoxicated, but filled to the full. For example, in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 18, be not drunk with wine, but be filled with the Spirit. You're not saying don't be intoxicated with one, but he's saying don't be filled to the full with wine, but be filled with the Spirit. The word filled is a term of measurement. And he's measuring that against the wine because people filled with the Spirit offer thanks to God. They sing praise to God, and so on in the text. What they would do is they would drink their wine before Bacchus, the god of wine at Ephesus. So he's saying don't engage. He's using something they would know. Don't be filled with that, but be filled with the Spirit. That's what he's saying. So in that John chapter 2, he's saying that, well, it says they're drunk. They're drunk. Drunk means drunk. Well, baptized means baptized too, doesn't it? But does baptized always mean baptized in water? Resurrection always means resurrection, doesn't it? But does it always mean resurrected body? No. So if he's not saying they're drunk, what is he saying? I'm going to propose something to you. You think about it. If you don't accept it, that's up to you. I'm responsible for teaching what I think the text says. Back up. Verse 1. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. And when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. Hyperbole. She's saying, okay, now make some more of the intoxicating stuff. Jesus said to the woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour's not yet come. Notice, they're at this wedding feast. We don't know how long the wedding feast has been going on. Wedding feast would last 7 days or more. Different than what we have. unless you're at Conrad and Mary's wedding. And that goes till midnight to the other day. Feast would last 7 days or more. We're not told how far they are in the feast. So if they've been drinking intoxicating wine for 7 days, they're more than wasted. But they've been drinking wine that is wine unfermented, like we demonstrated last week can be done. They're at this feast. They're partaking in the regular acts of hospitality of drinking wine. Now they're out of it. Jesus commands the water pots to be filled. So you have the water pots that are there. In between, probably around 60 gallons per water pot. So he's got 180 gallons of water in these pots, and now he's going to turn 180 gallons of water into wine. So he said, draw some out. They've turned it into wine, draw some out, and take it to the master of the feast. What does the master of the feast do? He takes it. So we know the master of the feast is not drunk. We know the master of the feast is not wasted. Because he still has his taste. He still has his discernment. The master of the feast had tasted the water that was wine, didn't know where it came from, and so what does he do? He goes and he gets the bridegroom. And what does he tell the bridegroom? He tells the bridegroom, not everybody's drunk, but he tells the bridegroom, this is what usually happens. What usually happens is, everybody at the beginning sets out the good when the guests have well drunk, then they bring out the inferior. You didn't do that. He's stating an ordinary observation that happens at feasts. He's not saying this is what they've done. He's saying this is what ordinarily happens. It's not a statement of whether they're drunk or not. It's a statement of what ordinarily happens at a feast. If I say, when men work hard, they become exhausted. But you spend all day on the couch. What have I stated? I stated general observation. When men work hard, they're exhausted, but you haven't worked. When I say when men sweat profusely, they begin to smell. But you stayed home, you haven't worked, and you still smell. If I say when men work profusely, they smell, does that mean everybody smells? No, I'm giving you just a general observation of things. John 2 verse 10 is not stating everybody's drunk at the feast. What it's saying that this is what normally happens when you have a feast. What do you normally do? You give the good first and the inferior last. Another translation. What you do is you serve 16-ounce T-bone first and hamburger helper second. And this time what you did was you served hamburger helper first and 16-ounce T-bone steak last. That's not what you normally do. And so what he's talking about here is the master is giving an object. The master of the feast, the master who takes it is simply giving an observation of what normally happens at a wedding or at a get-together. It's not a statement that the people here are wasted or drunk. And Jesus made more intoxicating wine for them. Well, then someone asked, was this wine fermented? The word here for wine is oinos. And here's my answer to that. I don't know, and you don't either. They don't use it like it is. Don't go say, I can go get my wine, I can go get my spirits out here, because Jesus turned water to wine, I can drink it. You don't know that's what they did. You don't know that's what Jesus did. You don't know whether that was intoxicating or not. I can make a strong argument for it not being, just like you may make a strong argument for it being. But you don't know and I don't know, so don't use it that way. But let me offer this one sidebar explanation. As I spoke last week, what did it take to produce alcohol? It took the yeast and the sugar. Nature does not produce intoxicants naturally. When the grape is on the vine, it's not an intoxicant. But that grape on the vine contains yeast and sugar, and depending on the strength of the yeast and the sugar, depends on the strength with which it can be fermented. The alcohol comes in and it destroys the yeast. And that's how you get something that's fermented. Question: where's the yeast and the sugar? Jesus did naturally miraculously what the vine produces. And when the vine produces it, it produces yeast and sugar. Where's the yeast and the sugar? It was produced miraculously. There was no yeast and sugar. What did he do? He turned water to wine. That's what he did. And so, whether that's fermented alcoholic or not, I don't know, you don't know, so don't say I can go drink my wine because Jesus did. Third and final thing on this. The wine that's there is not the point of the miracle. This is a transformation miracle. What he's saying is the old was here for a while and it's going out, and the new is coming, and the new is even better. I didn't serve the new first, I served the new last. The old is here, the old covenant is going to go away, and the new covenant is coming. And then, therefore, the beginning of the signs were there, and manifest His glory, and the disciples believed in Him. The transformation is, here is the new covenant coming under the new covenant. This is what it's going to be. This was a transformative miracle. And it wasn't about water to wine. It was about the old covenant going away and the new covenant coming. And Jesus transforming that. Whether you agree with me or not, you can't use this passage in its context and the purpose of it to say, Jesus used wine, I can use wine. That's not fair to the passage. That's not good faith study. Turn to Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2 and verse 13. There's a charge in Acts chapter 2 and verse 13 against Peter. The response indicates sweet wine was intoxicating. It says in verse 13, others mocking said, they are full of new wine. Some texts say full of sweet wine. The word for wine here is different than what we've talked about. It's the word glucose. And there's a strong question as to whether glucose is intoxicating or not. But just for argument's sake, we'll say that it has a slight intoxicating quality to it that would require men to linger long at it before they ever indulge in that. What's happened here? This thing in this house has happened where suddenly there was this great sound of wind, a rushing mighty wind, and you had tongues of fire sitting on men's head, the disciples' head, and when they began to speak, they all spake in a tongue they didn't know. And they're accused of being barbarians. What did barbarians drink? Unmixed wine. Straight, strong stuff. But what they're doing is they are speaking the gospel in a tongue every man that hears knows. But every man in that tongue can understand it. Someone bystanding says, well, verse 12, they're all amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, what could this mean? Some wag here says, oh, they're drunk. That's all this can mean. They're talking like drunk men. It's mocking, it's deriding. But Peter, standing with 11, raised his voice and said to them, enough of that. Enough of that. Men of Judea, all who dwell in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, hear my words, for we are not drunk as some suppose, seeing it's only the third hour of the day. Well, that must mean that Peter drinks. Because just the third hour of the day, if it's the ninth hour of the day, then it wouldn't be the case. It's just 9 o'clock in the morning, so it's too early to drink. Listen, guys who want to drink, sit long at wine, can be totally intoxicated by 9 o'clock in the morning. The fact that they are mocked about being drunk doesn't, number one, mean they were drunk, and number two, doesn't mean they drank anything to be drunk. You ever mocked somebody? But what you mocked them with wasn't true? You just derided them? Used this exaggeration, this derision to mock the person and discredit the person? They can't prove what Peter and the apostles are doing is wrong. So what are they going to try to do? They're going to try to prove them and discredit them as being men who can't be credible. So they're mocking them. Which doesn't say a thing about what the apostles drank or didn't drink, or if they did drink. Did the apostles drink wine? Probably. Now, Somebody else is going to have to go find where they drink intoxicating wine. If they drink fermented wine, most likely. When cut with water, as we saw last week, very, very small content. Turn to 1 Peter chapter 4. 1 Peter chapter 4. Let's back up to verse 1. Therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same mind. For he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that he shall long live the rest of his time in the flesh, for the lust of the men, for the will of God. Notice, Christ suffered and died. You also should have ceased from sin, and therefore the flesh be dead. So you no longer walk according to the lust of men, but you walk according to the will of God. Pause. Will of God doesn't mean commandment of God. Will of God doesn't mean revelation of God. Will of God means because I know His will by commandments, by revelation, and by His nature. I know what God approves of. It's stronger than simply saying, I have a command. If we know who God is, and we know something about His revelation, and we still know something about what He asks us to do is be holy in the first chapter, and to gird ourselves to be holy. What would be holy look like? Would holy look like following the lust of men? No. Holy would look like following the will of God. Well, where's the commandment? I don't know, but I know what holy is because I know God's holy. And He says, we spend enough of our past lifetime in doing the will of the Gentiles. Notice, He's fixing to describe the will of the Gentiles, the will of the lust of the flesh. We walked in lewdness, lusts, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, abominable idolatries. In regard to these things, they think it strange you not run with them the same flood of dissipation speaking evil of you. He gives 3 levels of drunkenness here. First of all, he said, what I just talked about is the will of the Gentiles. So if I'm going to engage in this, what I'm doing is I'm following the will of the Gentiles, not the will of the Lord. Seems to me to be what he's saying. First of all, you have drunkenness. That is totally insatiated to the excess. That's 99 bottles of beer on the wall. That's the sot drunk who staggers and can't keep himself up and hugs a commode all night long. Revelries. Looks at the carousings, the revelry that goes on. The Super Bowl champs, our football team won the Super Bowl, and now everybody's gathered down at Star, and everybody's down there shooting their guns off, running around, drinking, holding their bottles up, dancing, all kinds of lewd things taking place. Here you have a concert, and the concert's going on, and everybody that's there is drinking, and they're reveling, and they're shouting, they're jumping up and down as the potential excess. But that's the idea of revelries. And then drinking parties. Here you have the intellectuals. They sit in their smoke-filled rooms and talk about their philosophies, and while they do, they sip wine. While they do, they sip their drink. They're just sitting there socially engaged, sipping their drink, sipping their wine. They're just having a beer with one another. They're just having a shot with one another. I'll have another shot. Doesn't mean it's to excess. It can lead to excess. But they're just sitting there enjoying, imbibing of their drink, just sipping their drink. If that's not what describes social drinking, I don't know what describes it. Turn back to Proverbs chapter 23 real quick. Proverbs chapter 23. Now I know the overall tone of this passage has to do with drunkenness. But let's get there first, so stay with me. Those who linger long at wine, those who go in search of mixed wine. Do not look on the wine when it is red. Now, those who linger long and those who go in search aren't drunk yet. and don't look at it. Don't even think about it. So here are those who set their mind to go out in search of something. They deliberately go out to set their minds in search of this. And when they do, they sit and they linger long at it. They continue long at sipping it and sipping it and sipping it. What he's saying is, don't do that. Don't get drunk. Don't even look at it. Why? Because it's like a viper. It will reach up and it will bite you. How many of us would agree it's okay to have a boa constrictor run loose in our home? And what he's saying is, when you do this, you've got a boa constrictor running loose in your home. Sidebar. This morning I was teaching in 1 Peter chapter 4, and I ran by that. Jeff Becker raised his hand. Now, we all know that Jeff, as us all know at times, he's had a problem with alcohol. As an alcoholic, has been to rehab and tried to do his best to recover, and is doing well. And Jeff spoke up and said this. So this is not from Rickie. It's like the quote I used last week was from Total Wines. Jeff said this morning, and I asked him if I could use it. I'm going to do my best to say what he said, and if I don't, he can tell me no. And I'll let him stand up from there and he can shout. You're talking about this restraint of yourself. And you're talking about having the same mind as God and the will of God. He said what alcohol does to you is it reduces your inhibitions and affects your judgments. So you no longer distinguish between what the pursuit of the flesh is and what the will of God is. In that context, he wasn't talking about being sot drunk, were you? He was talking about the casual use of alcohol, correct? Did I represent you correctly there? But here's a man who's lived this. And he looked at this and he said, when you sit and you do that, it has an impact on your inhibitions and your judgments. And maybe that's one reason in Proverbs chapter 31 it says, kings, stay away from it because your judgment is important. It's 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 3. And the drinking parties, don't describe social drinking. I don't know what other passage you're going to go to do that. It's just strong there, it seems to me like. And then finally, let's turn to Deuteronomy chapter 14 and verse 26. Deuteronomy chapter 14 and verse 26. First of all, let me begin with you with a good faith statement. I don't understand Deuteronomy 14 verse 26. I'm going to do my best to explain something to you I have not yet figured out. But there's some things we have figured out. First of all, look at the setting. You shall truly tithe all the increase of your grain that the field produces year by year. And you shall eat before the Lord your God in the place where the Lord chooses to make His name abide. The tithe of your grain, your new wine, your oil of the firstborn of your herds, your flocks, that you may learn to fear the Lord your God. So, you're going to tithe from the produce you have the year, and you're going to do it in the place where the Lord makes His name abide. In this place, it would have been the tabernacle. Verse 24, but if the journey is too long for you, so you're not able to carry the tithe, or if the place where the Lord your God chooses to put His name is too far from you, when the Lord your God has blessed you, then you shall exchange it for money. Take the money in your hand and go to the place which the Lord your God chooses. And you'll spend that money for whatever your heart desires, for oxen, for sheep, for wine, similar drink. You shall eat therefore before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. You shall not forsake the Levite who is within your gates, for he has no part of the inheritance with you. First of all, notice, whatever is taking place here, whatever happens here, is in a worship before the Lord. They've come to the place where the Lord makes His name known. And they've come to offer their tithe to the Lord of all the produce. So they've come together to worship the Lord. Whatever they've done, they're coming to worship the Lord. Now, yes, you have this statement in verse 26. Similar drink is the word. Actually, it's a root. It comes from the root of the word shakar. The word shakar is found 23 times. 3 times, I've said several times, it is used without reference to what is strong drink as intoxicants. One is Deuteronomy chapter 26 and verse 9. Look over there real quickly. I'm sorry, 19. I tell you what, let's try chapter 29 and verse 16. And when you get there, try chapter 29 and verse 9. I'm sorry. And when you get to verse 9, go up 3 and look at verse 6. He says, "You've not eaten bread, nor have you drunk wine or similar drink, that you may know that I am the Lord." That similar drink is the word shakar. What's happening here? He's talking about when they have gone throughout the wilderness, what the Lord's provided there. He said, "You've not eaten bread, nor have drunk wine or similar drink, that you may know that I am the Lord." So it's looking at they're traveling through the wilderness. Now, if my mind recalls correctly, turn to Numbers chapter 28. Numbers chapter 28. And look at verse 7. "And its drink offering shall be 1/4 of a hin for each lamb in a holy place. You shall pour out the drink of the Lord as an offering." There's your word drink, and that's our word. Here's poured out as a drink offering. So in Deuteronomy chapter 29, it's used with regard to God providing it. It's a negative there. Here it's used with regard to being poured out as a drink offering. Going back to Numbers chapter 14 and verse 26. I'm sorry, Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 26. We see they've come and they've brought their tithe before the Lord in the place where the Lord records His name. Is Deuteronomy 26 saying, first of all, the first part of 26 is a repeat of verse 23. "Whatever your heart desires, you shall eat there before the Lord, and you shall rejoice, you and your family, in what? Wine and similar drink." Is He saying that when you come before the Lord, it's okay for you to drink your intoxicating drink and socially drink before the Lord while you're offering your worship to Him? First of all, you have to have the rule of harmony in the Word of God. And the rule of harmony never uses the term in a favorable way. It always is unfavorable. So is He now in a time of worship before the Lord, in a place where the Lord records His name, going to change that to now something that's favorable in worship of the Lord? And furthermore, in verse 26, it doesn't even say they drank it. It may be implied, I give that. But it says, "You shall eat there before the Lord your God, and shall rejoice, you and your house." Is it possible that they use it for cooking? And so they have their wine and similar drink, and they're going to eat before the Lord, and preparing their feast before the Lord, they use it for cooking? I told you, I don't know what the passage says. I can't successfully explain it to myself, much less explain it to you. But I know this. God's not going to use a term 23 times with an unfavorable connotation put to it, and now turn around and say, in an assembly of tithing to me, and in that assembly, you can now use strong drink in worship to me. That's like saying, let's have a shot of whiskey before we go to church. Oh no, let's just have a shot of whiskey while we're in church. But whatever it's saying, it's not something that's saying, okay, here's this obscure passage. We can reach down and say, oh, they use strong drink, we can use strong drink. I don't think that's fair to the passage. Again, we have to ask ourselves, what did it mean to them? And we can't put a template of things over us, we think, over them. We have to look in the context and try to reason for that. Now, I recognize that you may not agree with anything I've said today. My goal in preaching is, yes, to persuade you. I want you to agree with me. That makes me happy. What makes me happier is you do your study and you do your work. Don't just flippantly run through this. Don't just get a lick and a promise to it. You do your hard work and you do your hard study on that. And you come to your conclusion. It's my blessing to stand before you and share some of mine. As I've said in all this, I've tried to go back from the very beginning, erase what I could as far as the bias is concerned, admitting it's impossible to erase every bias. But when we look at the term that is used in an unfavorable way, it is never used in a favorable way for men to participate in strong drink, little or much, before God. Next week, we're going to conclude the series. No applause is necessary. Next week, we're going to conclude the speech by talking about some things, just practical wisdom things. What if sort of things to consider. You've been patient with me, and I appreciate it. You've listened well, all the lessons. I just ask that you take them into consideration. Again, I have no axe to grind with anybody. I'm not trying to poke a finger in anybody's eye. I am trying to appeal to you. I am trying to challenge your thinking, and because I'm concerned for your soul. Absolutely so. When I say I'm not trying to stick a finger in your eye, don't think I'm not persuaded about this. And I don't have strong convictions about this. I'm trying to reason with you. I'm trying not to get in your face. But I am concerned when someone engages in it. If we can help you this morning in some way, why don't you come while we stand and while we sing.
If you have questions, we'd like to hear from you. Our website's thebibleway.com, and you can submit those questions to info@thebibleway.com. We'd love to have you visit with us in the North Dallas area. Thank you for being part of our time today.